Have you ever finally worked up the courage to say no to someone you love and then almost immediately felt as if you'd done something terrible? Maybe you set a boundary. Maybe you said, I can't give you money this time. Or I can't keep having this conversation when you're yelling. Or I need some space. And for one tiny moment, there may have been relief. But then the guilt rushed in. Your chest tightened, your stomach dropped, and the mind started racing. What if they spiral? What if something bad happens? What if they think I don't love them? And what if this is my fault? And suddenly the boundary that you tried to set didn't feel like self-protection anymore. It felt like betrayal. So you softened it, you explained yourself, you gave in a little, you helped again. And later, when everything settled down, you were left wondering, why does saying no feel so awful when I know deep down that I can't keep doing this? If that sounds familiar, then this video is for you. Today I want to talk about why saying no can feel so guilty when you love someone who struggles with addiction, and why that guilt does not automatically mean you are doing something wrong. Because that's the trap, isn't it? We often assume that guilt is proof that we've been unkind, proof that we've failed them, and proof that we should go back and fix it. But sometimes guilt is not proof that you've done something wrong. Sometimes guilt is evidence that you've been carrying too much for too long. And before we go further, I want to say this clearly. This video is for reflection, education, and support. It isn't a substitute for professional counselling, crisis support, legal advice, or safety planning. If there is violence, coercive control, serious threats, or immediate danger in your situation, please don't try to manage that alone with a boundary script from the internet. Get real-world support, because your safety really matters. But today we're going to look at how the emotional guilt can come up when you try and step back, say no, or stop rescuing someone you love. If we haven't met yet, I'm Megan from Why Won't They Stop, where we talk about what it's like to love someone struggling with addiction without blaming yourself, losing yourself, or pretending that any of this is easy. And today's question is, why does saying no feel so guilty, even when the no is healthy? One of the first things I want you to know is this. The guilt you feel when setting a boundary is not random. It probably didn't come from nowhere. It may have been built over time. When addiction becomes part of a relationship or family system, the emotional rules often start to shift. Things that should be simple become loaded. A normal no becomes a crisis. A reasonable limit becomes an accusation. A request for space becomes abandonment. And a refusal to rescue becomes not caring. And over time, your nervous system begins to learn. It learns what happens when you say no. Maybe there's anger. Maybe there are accusations. Maybe there's crying or silence, sulking, blaming, panic, emotional collapse, or dramatic statements like, if you loved me, you'd help me. I guess I just have no one. Or fine, I'll deal with it myself. Or the classic emotional hand grenade. Don't worry about me, which of course makes you worry even more. And after enough of those experiences, your brain starts joining the dots. It starts to believe that when I set a boundary, something bad happens. When I say no, they get worse. And when I step back, I cause pain. And when I don't fix things, I am unsafe. Now, that doesn't mean those beliefs are true. But it does mean your body may respond as if they are true. And that's where guilt can become so powerful. Because the guilt is not just a thought, it's a whole body alarm. When you try and set a boundary, your nervous system may not experience that moment as calm adult communication. It may experience it as danger. You might be sitting there thinking, I just said no. But your body may be remembering every time that no led to yelling. Every time no led to blame. Every time no led to chaos. And every time no led to you feeling responsible for the fallout. So your nervous system does what nervous systems do. It tries to protect you. It says, abort mission, too risky, go back, fix it, smooth it over, keep the peace. And that can show up as guilt. It can show up as anxiety, urgency, and panic. And a need to explain, a need to justify, a need to text again, a need to check if they're okay, a need to reverse the boundary, and before it has even had a chance to stand upright. From the outside, someone might say, why don't you just say no and stick to it? As if you haven't thought of that. As if the whole situation has been sitting there wearing a name badge. But from the inside, it isn't that simple. Because part of you may know that the boundary is healthy, while another part of you feels that you're about to set the whole house on fire. That's why I want to say this very clearly. The guilt is not weakness. It is conditioning. Your system has learned to associate their distress with your responsibility. And that's a heavy lesson to unlearn. In a healthy relationship, no is allowed. It may be disappointing, it may be frustrating, it may need a conversation, but it is not treated as betrayal. In relationships affected by addiction, though, no can become emotionally expensive. And I want to be careful here, because this is not about demonizing the person struggling with addiction. Addiction often comes with fear, shame, desperation, denial, and survival behavior. But those things can still have an impact on the people around them. Two things can be true at the same time. They may be in real pain, and their pain may be putting pressure on you. They may be struggling, and you may still be allowed to have limits. They may need support, and you may not be the person who can carry all of it. And that's the hard middle ground, isn't it? Because when someone you love is struggling, it's natural to want to help. Of course you want to help. You love them. You remember who they were. You see who they could be. You know the good in them. You know the hurt beneath the behavior. So you help. And then you help again. And then you help again. Then you lend money. You smooth over arguments. You cover for them. You explain their behavior to other people. You answer the phone at midnight. And you try to predict the next crisis before it arrives. At first, it feels like love. And sometimes it is love. But love can slowly slide into rescuing. And rescuing can slowly become the price of keeping things from exploding. Before long, you may not even be asking, what do I want, or what's healthy here? You may only be asking, what do I need to do to stop this from getting worse? And that's an exhausting way to live. When you've lived in repeated crisis, your nervous system may learn a hidden rule. Keeping the peace is safer than setting limits. And for a while, that rule may seem to work. If you say yes, maybe they don't yell. If you send the money, maybe they calm down. If you answer the phone, maybe they don't feel abandoned. And if you back down, maybe the night ends without another emotional explosion. So your brain files that away as success. But here's the problem. Short-term peace is not the same as long-term safety. Sometimes what we call peace is really just the absence of immediate conflict. It's quiet, yes, but it's not peace. It's you holding your breath. It's you shrinking. It's you walking on emotional eggshells, hoping for the best. And that kind of peace costs too much, because over time, the cost begins to show. You get tired, not just sleepy tired, soul tired. You may become resentful, even if you don't want to be. You may feel like your whole life revolves around someone else's choices, moods, substances, crises, promises, relapses, recoveries, and emergencies. And the painful irony is this: the more you sacrifice yourself to keep the peace, the less peaceful your life becomes. And that's often the moment people begin to realize, I can't keep living like this. And then they try to set a boundary. And that's when the guilt roars. One of the most confusing things about boundaries is that guilt often gets louder right when the boundary is most needed. That feels unfair, doesn't it? You finally do the brave, healthy, responsible thing, and your body responds like you've committed a crime. But that doesn't mean the boundary is wrong. It may mean the boundary is unfamiliar. Think of it this way. You've spent years stepping in, fixing, absorbing, rescuing, smoothing, and softening. And stepping back will feel strange. It may feel cold. It may feel selfish. It may feel unloving, not because it is, but because it's new. The old role may have been painful, but it was familiar. The helper role, the fixer role, the emotional shock absorber role, the I'll just handle it role. These roles can become part of your identity. So when you say no, it can feel like you are not only changing your behavior, it can feel like you are breaking a contract that you never consciously signed, a contract that said, I will keep you stable, I will prevent the consequences, I will absorb the chaos, I will suffer so you don't have to. But that's not love. That's self-abandonment, dressed up in duty. And I know that might land hard, because if you've been doing this for years, it's probably not because you're foolish, it's because you care. It's because you've been trying so hard. And it's because you've been trying to stop the person you love from falling. But you are allowed to ask, what is this costing me? One of the biggest fears people have is, if I set a boundary, I'm being cruel. So let's slow that down. A boundary is not cruelty. A boundary is not punishment. A boundary is not revenge. A boundary is not you saying, I don't love you. A boundary is simply the point where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins. That's it. It's a line of responsibility. It might sound like, I love you and I'm not able to give you money. I care about you and I won't stay on the phone while I'm being shouted at. I want good things for you and I can't keep lying for you. I hope you get help and I can't make that choice for you. Notice that none of these say, I hate you, or you're on your own forever, or you don't matter, or you deserve pain. Boundaries don't have to be harsh to be real. They don't have to be dramatic, and they don't have to come with a courtroom speech and 3 supporting documents. Sometimes a boundary is calm, simple, repeated, and deeply uncomfortable. Because, let's be honest, the goal is not to make boundaries feel fabulous. They're never going to feel that way. The goal is to make them clear enough and steady enough that you stop abandoning yourself every time guilt knocks on the door. Here's a sentence that I want you to sit with. Love and responsibility are not the same thing. You can love someone deeply and still not be responsible for every consequence of their choice or their choices. You can care about their well-being and still not be able to rescue them from every crisis. You can wait and want them to recover and still not be able to recover for them. You can be compassionate without becoming the container for everything they refuse, cannot, or are not ready to carry. The distinction matters because guilt often says, if I love them, I should fix this. But healthier love may say, I love them and this is not mine to fix. It can be a brutal sentence at first, not mine to fix. Especially when you can see the solution, especially when you know what they could do, especially when you've explained it 700 times in 14 different emotional languages and they still do the thing. But knowing what someone needs does not give you the power to make them choose it. And that is one of the most painful truths in loving someone with an addiction. You can influence, you can support, you can encourage, you can be honest, you can offer resources, and you can love. But you cannot become their willingness. You cannot become their recovery. You cannot become their consequences. And if you try, you may slowly disappear from your own life. So, what do you do in the moment? What do you do when you set a boundary and the guilt floods in? First, pause. Even for a few seconds, that matters. Pause before you text back, before you explain again, before you offer a compromise you don't really mean, before you rescue. Just pause. Put a hand on your chest if that feels okay. Take a breath and name what's happening. You might say to yourself, this is guilt. This is my nervous system reacting. This feeling is intense, but it's not an instruction. That last one is important. A feeling is real, but it's not always a command. Guilt can be present without being in charge. And then ask yourself a different question. Instead of asking, am I hurting them? Try asking, what am I protecting? That question can change everything. What am I protecting? My health, my peace, my finances, my sleep, my home, my children, my future, my emotional stability, and my ability to keep showing up for my own life. Because boundaries are not about what you refuse, they're about what you are protecting. And when you've spent a long time focused on someone else's pain, your own protection can feel unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean wrong. Another thing I want to say is this. You don't have to start with the biggest, most terrifying boundary of your life. Please don't hear a video like this and think, right, tonight I'm going to overhaul my whole family system with one dramatic speech. Tiny bit of advice, don't do that. That's how we accidentally turn boundaries into a fireworks display. Start smaller if you can. Start with clarity. You might begin by noticing, where do I say yes when I mean no? Where do I over-explain? Where do I rescue because I'm scared of their reaction? Where do I confuse discomfort with my wrongdoing? And where do I feel responsible for preventing consequences? You might not change anything immediately. You might just start seeing the pattern. That counts. Awareness is not nothing. Sometimes awareness is the first honest breath after years of holding everything in. Then, when you're ready, you might practice one small boundary. Something like, I'm not able to talk about this tonight. Or, I can't give money. I'm going to take some time before I respond. Or, I won't continue this conversation if I'm being blamed or insulted. And the work is not just saying it. The work is staying with yourself afterwards, when the guilt rises, when the body wants to backpedal, when your mind starts building a legal defense for why you're allowed to have a limit. That's the practice. Not perfect boundaries, practiced boundaries. It's worth saying this too. A boundary may not bring instant peace. Sometimes we imagine that once we set a healthy boundary, we'll feel calm, empowered, and magnificent, maybe with sunlight coming through a window and a soundtrack playing. And sometimes, yes, there can be relief. But often, especially at first, you may feel awful. You may shake, you may cry, you may doubt yourself, and you may really want to take it back. But it doesn't mean that you've done the wrong thing. It means your system is adjusting. If you've been trained to feel responsible for someone else's emotional state, then letting them have their own feelings may be almost unbearable at first. And this is part of unlearning. You're teaching your nervous system something new. You're teaching it that I can love someone and still have limits. I can disappoint someone and still be safe. I can allow someone to be upset without rushing to fix it. And I can feel guilt without obeying it. That takes time. So be gentle with yourself. Not soft in the sense of collapsing, gentle in the sense of steady. There's a difference. Here's a question I love for this topic. The next time guilt rushes in after you set a boundary, ask yourself, if protecting myself feels wrong, what have I been taught about love? That's not a small question. It may take you somewhere tender. Because many of us were taught, directly or indirectly, that love means self-sacrifice. Love means enduring. Love means proving. Love means staying available. Love means not upsetting people. Love means giving more chances. Love means being needed. And some sacrifice is part of love. So let's be honest about that. Real love is not always convenient, but love that requires you to keep abandoning yourself is not healthy love. At some point, the question becomes, can I love this person without disappearing? And that question is at the heart of so much of this work. So if saying no feels guilty right now, please don't use that guilt as a weapon against yourself. Don't turn the guilt into another reason to believe you're failing. Try to see it as information. It may be telling you, this pattern has been here a long time, and this role is familiar. This boundary is touching something deep, and this part of me is scared. And scared parts don't need shame. They need steadiness. They need truth. And the truth is that you're allowed to have limits. You're allowed to protect your peace, and you're allowed to stop carrying consequences that are not yours. You're allowed to love someone without rescuing them, and you're allowed to say no, even when your voice shakes. The guilt you feel does not mean that you're doing something wrong. Excuse me. It may simply mean that you're doing something new, and you can feel dangerous before it feels free. Excuse me. If this video spoke to something you've been carrying, I'd love you to leave a comment below with, even comment the word protecting. Or if you feel comfortable, share what you are learning to protect in your own life. Your peace, your sleep, your finances, your health, your future, yourself. And if you want a gentle next step, I've linked some free resources below to help you begin untangling what's yours to carry and what isn't. Please like this video if it helped, subscribe for more conversations like this, and share it with somebody who may need the reminder that boundaries are not betrayal. You do not have to carry this alone. I'll see you in the next video.